Coming to paperback and e-readers, E-Steam Cancel Vacation. Hell's aspiring angel takes on a social justice social media mob looking to cancel her in this all-new E-Steam series adventure. Pre-order E-Steam Cancel Vacation on Amazon.com today. According to the 2020 U.S. Census, the white population here in America declined for the first time. Now, when I take a critical examination of this decline in America's white population, it has a direct connection to America's ongoing man crisis that I talk about in my book, The Man Crisis. And the reason why America's population of white Americans wound up declining is because your white female was empowered by the wealthy and corporate America. And because your white female was taken out of her natural role in God's natural order, she is now more focused on climbing up the corporate ladder than being fruitful and multiplying under the authority of the Most High God. And under God's standard, He made the decree that people were to go out here and be fruitful and multiply and build families through marriage. Unfortunately, as the baby boomer generation came along and had all of the creature comforts of society, they decided to walk away from the order of the Most High, and they decided to go out here and go in a completely different direction outside the order of God. Now, I go deep in depth in this in The Man Crisis and my upcoming book in 2022, The Woman Crisis, and this is the main reason why the white population in America has shrunk over the last 50 years and why we're starting to see this decline in the white population. Because when you have your families under God's order, you had the man in his natural traditional role as leader, as authority figure, and as protector and provider. And then you had the woman in the home caring for the children and managing the household, and they were building a family together. Unfortunately, in the 1960s, as the feminist movement came to rise in America, we started to see a complete breakup of the American family unit. And as we broke the American family unit up through the no-fault divorces and the establishment of the welfare state and your women leaving to join the workforce, we started to see the birth rates in America start to primarily decline. And one of the reasons why your white population has declined over the last 50 years is because your woman is in the workforce and she's in the place that the black man was supposed to be, because many of your corporate bosses, they would rather give the white female a job through affirmative action rather than give the black man that job. And because they gave the white female the jobs that the black man had, this is the core reason why your pregnancies started to decline in America over the last 50 years. And as those white females then came to rise in corporate America, they then taught their daughters not to think about building a household and a family. No, they started to teach their daughters to head down the empowerment road of having a college education, having a job, and having a career. And as those daughters then followed in their mother's footsteps, because this was the culture not only taught to them at home, but also taught to them in media like the Mary Tyler Moore Show, Murphy Brown, and other shows like The Days and Nights of Molly Dodd and Sex and the City, teaching them that a career had more priority than marriage. Then what happened to your American white woman was she, instead of her focusing on marriage and a family, she started focusing on trying to move up that corporate ladder. And as she moved up that corporate ladder, she wound up on a road where she was thinking the feminist narrative of I can put off pregnancy until later on instead of going out here and getting pregnant in her early 20s and late teens, like most women used to do back in the days when we had the industrial complex of factories here in America. Because back in those days, what would happen is a girl would graduate high school, she would marry her sweetheart in some cases, or a guy from the military, or a guy who had graduated from college, and at the age of 18, 19, 20, 21, they would go out here and start their family at a very young age. Because back then, a guy who would get a good factory job making $30, $40 an hour, that guy could go out here and buy his first home in 2 years on the job, and they could go out here and start a family. Unfortunately, your corporate types, they didn't want to see your American man go out here and build his family, because when he builds his family, he builds wealth. So they wanted to invest in the female, because the female would not go out here and produce wealth building assets or a wealth building platform, and instead of her being a producer of wealth, she would be a consumer who would go out here and drive the consumer-based economy. And because your wealthy wanted to see the American woman be the consumer that would generate them profits, they invested in the woman, hoping to generate wealth for themselves. Unfortunately, it came at the expense of the American white population. And now that the white population is starting to shrink, now we start to see a lot of fear coming from many of your groups, like your white supremacists and even those racists in corporate America, because without anybody to go out here and bear children, there are no heirs to carry on many of these white people's legacies, because they went out here and they invested in empowering their woman. There is nobody to carry on and build and maintain the wealth they have established, and this is what terrifies many of your white Americans, because many white Americans who are, especially the racists, they have a fear of genetic annihilation. Unfortunately, the great irony is, in their quest to empower their females, they may have possibly sped up that whole genetic annihilation. That is the great irony in this whole 2020 census, is that it shows how your racists, in their efforts to undermine black empowerment, wound up undermining themselves in the long term. And the way they undermine themselves is by investing in your feminist women. And when they invested in your feminist women, what they did was ironically lead to them having lower birth rates, and now those lower birth rates are having an impact on your white hegemony and your overall dominant white population. And that's one of the things that scares many of your racists, because they could dominate with numbers, but when your numbers are declining, you cannot dominate a community, you cannot dominate a society. And you have some whites who are trying to covertly try to recruit Hispanics and Asians to bluster their numbers. Unfortunately, what's going to happen is that there are going to be far more divides as related to these attempts, and the attempts to import other people and try to make them the new white race, like they did back during the days of the early days of the Great Immigration of the early 1900s, where they brought in the Germans, the Polish, the Slavic. They used all of these groups to try to bluster the white race, and that's what they're trying to do here with many of these other groups, like your Indians, your Asians, and your Hispanics. They're trying to bluster the platform of white supremacy, which has become rickety. And it has become rickety, again, in another great ironic way, because they did not heed the message of the old African proverb. Now, the old African proverb says a race can rise no higher than the moral position of its women, and as the woman goes, so goes the race. And when your white America then embraced feminism, it seems that they embraced the woman with the lowest moral position, and because they embraced the woman with the lowest moral position and made her the dominant teacher of culture, she has set the race on a course to hell, and she set it on a course to hell because now you have your women focused on having careers instead of going out here and building a lasting legacy through a family, because in order to build a legacy, you need the man to go out here and generate the tangible wealth, and you need the woman to teach the value of what that man has built by showing her appreciation and gratitude to that man. Unfortunately, when you have a woman who has a feminist mindset, she is not appreciating what that man has built. She does not appreciate the legacy of what he is trying to preserve. And instead of her trying to preserve what the man has worked towards building, she is instead working on competing against that man and looking to tear down everything that that man has built. And this is another reason why your populations have been declining in many of these developing countries, because many of these developing countries wanted to go out here and empower their women under their own order instead of following the standard that the Most High Living God has established for men and women. Because under that standard, where the Most High God created marriage and told men and women to be fruitful and multiply, this is how you get a world filled with people, and this is how you keep your birth rates up, so that there is a generation to be able to build and maintain what their fathers and grandfathers wound up establishing generations ago. Now, there are some out here who want to say that there are too many people on the earth, but to those kinds of people, I have to say, go read Psalms 24, verse 1, which says the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. And then I want to direct you to Psalms 49 and Psalms 50, which show you that the Most High God and His Son Jesus know everything that goes on in the earth. They know where everything is, and nobody can tell them how to run the planet, because the planet is under the authority of Jesus or Yah, and the Most High God rules over all of it. So when you have an arrogant person who wants to sit there and say too many people are on the earth, I have to say to them, who are you to tell God how to run His planet? Because He's been running His planet for millions of years, and He knows better than us who are out here with our little college degrees and our so-called educations and our so-called statistics. He's been running this planet longer than you have been alive. And when people sit there and say, oh, that we're going to go out here and go in our own way, okay, you've gone your own way. And when you go your own way, God makes it where you are, again, going to have to deal with the consequences. And what we're dealing with here, as related to the decline of the white population, is what happens when you go outside of God's natural order and decide to go in your so-called New Age direction. And when you go in your New Age direction outside the order of God, what happens is you start to feel those consequences. And one of those consequences is that your birth rates start declining and your culture winds up falling off a cliff, because only civilizations that follow the kingdom will grow and prosper. Others will go out here and wither and die. And this is what's happened to your white population over the last 50 years. They started on the road to decline. and that road to decline is the same road that the Romans went on when they empowered their women. Same thing with the Babylonians, same thing with the Egyptians. They empowered their women, took them out of the natural role God established for women, and then wanted to go out here and have the woman in the man's role in an effort to get rich. And now that leads to a rise in poverty and a shrinking population of skilled people who won't be able to take care of the country, and that leaves you vulnerable to invaders and desperate for trying to maintain your civilization. But again, this is par for the course for any civilization that goes outside the order of God, and what we're seeing with the white American is what happens when you go outside the order of God and you don't go out here and do what is right, like giving the black man his due and his reparations and his tangibles. Had your white racists given the black man those jobs through affirmative action, he would not be in a place where his birth rates are declining, and he's terrified of that genetic annihilation. Now, this is a video one of my viewers requested, and if you want to request a video, you can donate to the Cash App, and I'll make that video for you. And if you want to see me make classic videos like this, you can also donate to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. And if you want to pick up some of my books, like The Man Crisis and my other men's issues books like Stop Simpin', you can find all of those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them on Smashwords, the iBookstore, and Google Play. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers. Isis, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess. The goddess next door takes on the threat of a deadly digital diva driven to destroy the world in this action-packed, all-new Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess featuring a bonus pin-up and the other 2 books in the Cyber Goddess saga at online bookstores everywhere today.